I think there are certain enablers, and these enablers can be impediments if used in the improper fashion. But I look at the first thing is people, talent. You've got to have the right people. You've got to have people that will not be awestruck by growth, not be awestruck by, the numbers of products you have, for instance, or the numbers of stores, or the top line revenue. You've got to have the infrastructure with which to enable that, because that's really the engine that drives most of your businesses, is the infrastructure piece. You've got to have customers, of course, and that seems rather obvious, but when customers go away, then you realize that, wait a minute, I needed them in the first place anyhow to make this a viable entity. You've got to have product.
Hello, everyone. I'm Rishi Katz, and welcome to the Oval Table, where we discuss all things related to helping those who live and work within your business how to survive, thrive, avoid pitfalls, have more fun, and become successful faster. Getting advice and input from someone outside of your business can make a big difference, and that's what we seek to do for you each and every week. Here at the Oval Table, we believe that every voice matters, and we want to model how that works. Often the advice that makes the difference comes from where you least expect it. We seek every week to provide a lens for a different way to do business. So much more is possible when everyone's ideas make it to the table. Let me introduce you to our co-hosts, Doug Bowers, Vaughn Johnson, and Carl Walsh. What do you guys have for our listeners this week?
Well, today we have with us Bill Mcfarland, a gentleman I have worked with a couple of different times in different companies. But before we get on to him, and you do want to stay with us to hear him, before we get to that, we thought we'd go down memory lane with the shows that we've created in this first season of ours, where we've been, where we are, and hopefully an eye to where we're going.
Thank you, Carl. What we wanted to do is review some of these things because some of the information is of tremendous value to you, and I think you would be well advised to review the shows we've covered. In show number 1, we gave you a very quick rundown of our content and why we do what we do. Unscripted, unrehearsed, off top of mind, which gives you the framework with how we approach our subject. In show 2, we interviewed Joe Moore, who is the president of a radio station in Fresno, a station started by Vaughn 45 years ago. Joel told us the secret to nonprofits, which is the same as the secret to your business: no margin, no mission. In show 3, we interviewed Jesse Stancarone, who is called in to improve and rescue multi-million-dollar businesses. I start with the people, interviewing them one-on-one. It is that important. In show 4, we talked with a program management expert, Maria Mcfarland. She goes into a foreign country where she is told that they will not talk to you because you're a woman and an outsider. All she asked was, give me a chance, and she made it happen. In show 5, we talked with Mike Sorella, who has operated cable systems in the Northeast and in the Caribbean. We work with the customers as they are, and we serve their needs that they have, even if we have to make exceptions for them. In show 6, we talked with Gary McKenzie, who does accounting and tax work outside Modesto, which is prime farm country in California. Gary and his team were responsible for moving the estate tax exemption from $600,000 to $5 million. This alone saved the family farms. Gary said that the one thing you have to be in small business is tenacious. In show 7, we talked to Leah, the pasta queen of Pasadena. She specializes in producing a quality product, rewarding and growing her employees, which is critical factor number 4. Serving people is her love language. In show 8, we talked with Jim Hearn. We asked Jim, how do you manage in a chaotic situation? And this is a person who runs billion-dollar business. And he told us in one paragraph exactly what to do while at the same time rewarding and enriching your employees. In show 9, we talk with Jolene Brown, who works with farmers and other small businesses on succession planning. The first thing she wants to know is this a business first and a family second, or is this a family first and then a farm? If you don't have a written succession plan understood by all parties, you don't have a succession plan. In show 10, we were honored by the chance to interview Mike Hansborough, a decorated Navy flyer. He developed a worldwide computer business long before it was cool to do so, operating virtually. He sets up vendors around the world so that he can get the very best talent to apply to his customers' needs. And so today we bring you Bill Mcfarland, who was the CIO of a growing business that grew from 60 stores to 800 stores, doing $1.2 billion in sales.
If you're enjoying this podcast, wait till you get your hands on Doug's book, We Are Alpha Dogs, available on Amazon and wherever books, ebooks, and audiobooks are sold. Go to wearealphadogs.com for bonuses and downloads to help you and your company become legendary. And if you are especially adventurous, while you're at it, take the dog quiz and find out more about who you really are. Now, back to the oval table.
Today we have with us a gentleman I've known for many years and in a couple of different companies, Bill Mcfarland. Bill Mcfarland has been a CIO. He has been a consultant. He has worked with many different retail companies. I first met him in a company where we grew it from 60 stores to 800 in a very short period of time. He has worked with a toy retailer. He's worked with a shoe retailer and manufacturer, a building supply retailer, garden supply retailer, grocery and convenience store retailer. Bill has been there. He has done that. And we are very pleased to have him with us today. So, Bill, one of the things that we certainly wanted to talk to you about is how a business handles scale and how you prepare for that.
I think there are certain enablers, and these enablers can be impediments if used in the improper fashion. But I look at the first thing is people, talent. You've got to have the right people. You've got to have people that will not be awestruck by growth, not be awestruck by the numbers of products you have, for instance, or the numbers of stores, or the top line revenue. You've got to have the infrastructure with which to enable that, because that's really the engine that drives most of your businesses, is the infrastructure piece. You've got to have customers, of course, and that seems rather obvious, but when customers go away, then you realize that, wait a minute, I needed them in the first place anyhow to make this a viable entity. You've got to have product. I've worked with a number of companies who had great sales, and then all of a sudden that product was replaced technologically by something else. You've got to have the supply chain. You've got to have the delivery mechanisms by which to get products to your shelves and to the consumer. And you've got to have the proper locations, which is just another piece of the supply chain in many cases. Any one of those that slip one way or the other, I believe, is going to be an impediment to growth.
Would you recommend to, a small, closely held business who gets it in their head it's time to grow, that they bring on someone who's been there, done that, someone who has a consulting firm? What would be your recommendation to that?
Of course, you would want to bring on somebody who's been there, done that. In many cases, a lot of these companies, first of all, don't know they need it, but second of all, maybe can't afford it. So in that case, or don't think they can afford it. In many cases, I counsel businesses that you can't afford not to have it. Maybe it's not a leadership position that somebody needs to get in. It's just provide the provision of advice that will allow them to think differently about how they're going to take care of this activity and move on with it. A lot of companies think that their secret sauce is their secret sauce, and in essence, it's not. But they don't want to let others know how they got there, because then they could take the same approach and maybe outclass them.
Bill, I'd like to talk about that secret sauce in business is a different thing. Sometimes we run across people who say, I'm in this business and I think nothing else you have to say relates to that. And what you're saying is business is just plain business, and it doesn't matter what line you're in. I mean, there are differences, but they're not key differences. I mean, the basic structure still is pretty much the same.
I think a lot of people get confused with success and don't use the key elements, the people, the infrastructure, the customers, the supply chain. Those things are in almost every business. I can't think of many who don't have those kinds of particulars that are going to allow them to be successful. Right now, I think it's the number one fact is people. You always have to have capital, and you always have to have a good idea. And I think those things are kind of like table stakes. The entrepreneur or the owner of the company or whatever can't be the smartest guy in the room. You have to be, secure enough in your positioning within yourself to hire somebody that's brighter than you. Hire somebody who has been there and not feel intimidated by that. Because if you do, then you just sort of stymied your ability to grow in and of itself. So never be afraid to hire somebody that's smarter than you. If I look back on the people that I've hired, damn near all of them were smarter than me.
How do you bring that aspect out? I mean, how do you share that vision in a job interview or third interview or whatever you're doing?
Most companies that are going to grow have a strategic plan. One of the first things as a consultant, whether I was doing a strategy job for them or a system selection, whatever, the first thing I would ask them for is, what's your 5-year plan? Where do you want to be in 5 years? Because unless you know where you're going, your path to get there is going to be very stumbling. And I think that it's been astounding to me how many companies have it right here, but don't have it on a piece of paper that they can share with people. So a planful, articulated strategy is absolutely required, I think, to make people understand that they have a wonderful opportunity. And in 5 years, where you want to be in 5 years, you name it, you can be there, because the company is going to morph and change as it grows to allow you, the applicant, the opportunity to be whatever you like. Entrepreneurs always want to run a business. Aside from the plan, if you get excited about the company, its products, the services that you're rendering, that's also a big factor in what you're doing.
One way to kind of capture the interest of those people is to say, well, you can have your own business within this business. You can have your own division, you can have your own sector to run and expand it. And it's just like owning your own business, and it's that much excitement, but you don't necessarily have to provide the capital and deal with all of the problems. We've got other people around who can help you do that.
That's absolutely well articulated. Absolutely.
So another problem that the small business guy is going to have in a closely held business is, how do you manage these kind of people?
How do you keep them challenged is another
and
thing.
Also challenged, yes.
And when you're in a fast-paced environment, that's pretty darn easy to do. You can always rethink how you're approaching things. When we were at Disney, Carl and I were able to challenge ourselves and our teams because we were going to other companies or to other countries. We were always bringing on new products and looking at new segments. that helped us a lot. I think, our current day's economic and employment environment provides a different set of challenges than we perhaps have had in the past. And I think that those smart people who are able to articulate how best to do that, whether it's, you can work from anywhere, roll your own job kind of a thing.
Well, what happens if some of these people kind of get off the reservation, so to speak?
Well, again, you get back to your core competencies and articulate or revisit with them, the strategy of where you're going. If you get off the reservation, get sort of distracted from the vision of the company and where we're going, in many cases, you just bring them back to where they are. And many managers, many senior managers will get a little frustrated with people who spend too much time on the new sexy thing and too little time on the nuts and bolts of why they're there to keep. So you have to keep reining them in and bring them back to center as to, why are we here? What are we doing? And when we are successful, here's what we all gain from that. And I think those smart companies are now looking at all this stuff and saying, okay, wait a minute. We have a workforce that is disparate. That's okay. How do we manage those people who aren't there? It's hard to kick somebody in the butt or pat somebody in the back, more importantly, when they're on the other side of a Zoom call. But you can still do it. And people are doing it. And people are successful. And I think people are understanding that, what, the sort of mores and goals and paradigms that we had in the past, you can blow those up. But when you blow them up, you also have to look at the downstream implications of what those are and make that a success.
So you have a background as a CIO, technology, and implementer of support tools for the people that we're talking about. I'm curious what your thinking is around how technology is evolving to support businesses that want to scale.
Boy, that's a good question, and there's a lot packed into that that I could answer. But I think one of the big things that I will admit that I've missed in the past in many of my excursions into these unknown ERP implementations or just a little small infrastructure package is the change management aspect of that. And, in other countries, Europe in particular, they've really embraced that whole concept. How Peggy Sue's job changes with the introduction of new technology needs to be fostered and understood. Now, Peggy Sue may not be able to take it. And that's where I get back to the people and the jettisoning of those people just in time to ensure that you can keep the trajectory that you need. Not everybody is able to grasp the concepts of growth and how that changes. But many people are and don't get credit for it. So the aspect of how her job is going to change from point A to point B is very important for everyone to understand, because you're going through a transformative process when you put in these big infrastructure projects, and it's a lot of money. And to say that you're going to throw that money away because you're not making people understand how they're going to deploy and use that to get to their job, and their job is now their old job plus much, much more because it's been enabled by a tool that they have. It's like giving a carpenter a saw when he was hacking it with an axe before. Oh my God, I can do so much more with this. Well, a technology tool is basically the same. You got a hammer and you got a saw, but it's a keyboard and a processor in the cloud somewhere that's helping them match invoices or trend sales or analyze a business.
How does the head of a closely held business decide what kind of systems that they need and then decide which system is the right one to help them get where they want to go.
Most of these big infrastructure projects have at least a stated 5-year life. And I would argue that if you think it's 5, it's going to be 15 because of the gut wrenching change that you have to put an organization through. Can't be done every 5 years and shouldn't be done every 5 years because that's not good use of your capital. So what that entails is that the management of the company have to look ahead maybe 10 years, maybe longer than they've ever looked in the past, and guess. In many cases, guess. I can't guess where technology is going to be in 10 years, but you have a pretty good idea what you need in 10 years, what your footprint is going to be, whether it's a retail company with stores, e-commerce, and a very visible supply chain, or if it's a consulting company who just needs heads and a couple good ideas to get themselves going. So I think you really have to have a vision, articulate that vision to all these suppliers that you're interviewing, or perhaps hire somebody like myself to foster those kinds of activities and make people think. In many cases, I've had to pull it out of people. Where do you want to be in 10 years? And they've never thought of it before. So then you have to go through an exercise and walk them through, okay, what products are you going to have? How many locations are you going to have? What kind of people are you going to need to run the business then? Maybe all the people you have now won't last and won't be here in 10 years. Well, then what's the target audience for the technology in 10 years? And it's a bitter pill to swallow in many cases for managers, because that means that half the people that they've fostered through the last X number of years in their existence might not be able to handle it. Ideally, you'd want to be able to bring them along, but in some cases, you have to realize and realize that quickly that this is not my end game, and there are people yet to be found that I will use in the future to help me get successful.
Well, one thing I think a technologist could be 100% certain of is that whatever you're doing now, you won't be doing later. Whatever your tools are won't be later. They'll be different. No matter what you do, they're going to be different. So don't wedge yourself to an existing tool set, because the new tool set will be substantially different.
Right.
One other thing you brought up earlier on is the idea of secret sauce. And we certainly here understand that concept because we have a definitely developed secret sauce. But we're under the operating principle that we have to share that with everybody. How does somebody get over the idea that I have a secret sauce and I don't want to tell anybody?
I would answer that question with a question: do they have to? I think in many cases in my career, I've had to tell somebody that their baby's ugly, and nobody wants to hear that. But I think that in telling somebody, you're not the first person to have this idea, and your idea is probably not that good anyhow, isn't something that you want to deliver without a suit of armor. But in some cases, they need to hear it. In some cases, they need to understand that, you've been in the right place at the right time, and you've got that luck, or you've been a first mover. So, now there are 15 people that are doing the same thing that you are doing. You have to change and make that just a little bit better than it was before, because everyone else is going to figure that out too. And if you are indeed a first mover, in that case, you kind of have a secret sauce because you have the idea first. You have to keep refining that to ensure that it is indeed your competitive advantage. So, secret sauce is a competitive advantage in many cases, but you have to make sure that it is indeed something that patentable, something that nobody else is doing, and that you have a unique set of barriers to entry that no one else can.
Well, one thing we've commented on in the past is that every business has its tricks, has its ways of doing something that it has figured out. It's not necessarily a big technology concept, but there are tricks nonetheless as to how to get something done. So that part of the secret sauce might be hidden or might stay within the business, just be a team thing. Whereas what we're trying to accomplish, where we're trying to go, who we're trying to serve, and how we're going to serve them, and how we model all that is part of your secret sauce. But that's probably public sauce.
Right. You can't fall in love with your product. You can't fall in love with your idea above and beyond reason. And in order, the ability to accept that I am not the smartest guy in the room, and I don't have all the answers, is really a key to longevity, I think, because the minute you think that you've got all the answers, someone else has five more questions that you've never thought of.
So when you meet somebody who's, I've got a business that's been successful and we're growing good and stuff like that, and then you sit down and you talk to them, and if they come off and saying, "I'm the smartest guy in the room," what do you do at that point? Do you dissuade them of that issue? You challenge them?
As easy as you can. I guess you kind of have to, either that or you pack up your briefcase and say, okay, I'm
See
done
ya.
here. Yeah, you know, and that's a pretty cavalier attitude to have. But sometimes you have to do that. In many cases, you can dissuade them by circling around those adages or those facets that they think that they are completely unique, and say, well, wait a minute, somebody else is doing this too. You know, you weren't the first to do this. Maybe you're the best now. And how do you keep yourself at that pinnacle of success, or wherever or that target? I have had those experiences, and I have walked away. When you walk out of I went to a party goods retailer way back when, and I was with Arthur Anderson at the time, and the partner and I went in, and we're asking the CFO question upon question upon question upon question, and this was a heavily franchised business, and I quickly came to the conclusion that they had no idea where their inventory was, and weren't even thinking about needing to know that. So as we're walking into the parking lot, I said to the partner, we need to short this stock because there's just no way. And sure enough, a couple of months later, the CEO and the CFO were indicted for embezzlement and financial fraud because of those kinds of issues. If you don't know what you don't know, then there's not a lot somebody can do to dissuade you.
I had a situation once where I was talking to a guy and he says, "I have an MBA, you have an MBA. What makes you think you know more than I do?" And well, first of all, you're not growing. Second of all, your pay is very poor, and so maybe you need to make a change. Okay, maybe I do. Yeah. These are hard situations to overcome when the person on the other hand has made assumptions that are not valid, and they keep getting reinforced, sometimes by employees who say, "Yes, sir."
I have worked for those companies, and the owner of the company will say, I value and appreciate my senior executives. I listen to them, and they all, and everyone else around them. Yes, we do. Yes, we do. Yes, we do. Well, there's a problem. There's a problem, and you can't keep kicking the can down the road. Kicking the can down the road only, disables your ability to handle the future.
Well, we certainly experience that with government policy, don't we?
Yeah, that's true. That's true.
So one thing you could do is tell us emotionally what it is like to be in a fast growing company and look down the road at what could be very fearful as to how in the world are we going to do this?
You opened with, what is it that takes people to want to get up every Monday and come to work, and the excitement that there is around that. I think getting a cadre of people who share in that excitement is very fulfilling. Carl and I have been with companies who were dictated by the chairman of the company to double in size every 5 years. While that seems like a number, once you get to a critical mass, that number gets to be fairly astounding. And you know in your heart that you can't keep hitting home runs. You're going to hit a single every once in a while. And how do you ensure that that single is going to turn into a run eventually, because you got four guys behind them that are going to get signals to drive that in. That's not an easy concept to grasp at first, but I think that everyone understands that, when you hit a home run, enjoy it, because it won't last forever, and learn from the things that didn't allow you to hit a home run each time. And I think that if you're in a constant learning state, and you facilitate that through example with your teams, then they know that first of all, it's okay to make a mistake as long as you learn from it, because mistakes are more valuable in their learning than all the successes in the world. Nobody ever built a big company on success after success after success after success. Every once in a while, you have to try something that's a stinker. Ensuring that that the culture in the organization facilitates that constant learning and that ability to fail, so long as you learn from it, is a very valuable asset for an entrepreneur, closely held company, or whatever to have. Now, in many cases, you're hamstrung by capital, and in smaller companies, and you have to ensure that you're not betting the farm in each one of your mistakes. And I think that's where the magic and the science have to come together at that point.
Yeah, I have found actually that working these kinds of situations, a lot of this is not glamorous. You need a culture that is fun. Fun more important than glamour, and the glamour really doesn't hit until you pause, you look back, and you go, "Wow, we just opened 100 stores in the past year." But then, of course, the thoughts start creeping in. Oh boy, how do we manage that now? And how do we get 125 open next year?
You have to keep all the customers happy and the shelves filled with good product that people want to buy. Those are much easier to said than done.
You can't sell what you don't got.
Right.
All right. Well, to wrap this up, Bill, how can people get in touch with you if they wish to take advantage of your services?
I'm on LinkedIn, william.macfarlane at cmgchange.com. Yeah, those are probably the best ways.
Wow, what a great conversation. Alpha Dogs are always the first in line for the good stuff. So remember to download your favorite episodes at theovaltable.com. Stay up to date by subscribing and review us on Apple Podcasts to let other top dogs know how much you enjoy these conversations. Now, let's go back to the Oval Table to hear what impressed the guys from the interview.
One thing I found very interesting about Bill's discussion, when we asked him how did he do it, he said the first thing is people and their talent. You got to have the right people, not awestruck by growth, but you got to have the right people with the talent. After people comes infrastructure, and then the customers. His other focus was to have a 5-year plan that you share with the people and keep them on track. Here at the table, we have someone who lived that growth with Bill. Carl, tell us what it was really like.
Well, first, right from the top, it was one of the best times I've ever had. It was so exciting. It was so fun to do that. And with a company that was just great to work with. And I'll mention the company here. It's the Walt Disney Company, which we were a part of and growing out the Disney stores. So how did we do this? First of all, we were really light on our feet. We had to deal with things, with problems very quickly, because we were creating something new. Also, we had to have total buy-in to what we were doing in the IT department. And there was a way that we did that. Every 2 weeks, we had a meeting with people at the middle management level. We sat around a table. Does that sound familiar? Everybody who's been listening to this podcast, we sat around a table and we prioritized the various systems and changes that were on the table every week or every 2 weeks. And everybody had a say in what the priorities were. Now, the interesting thing about this is that some people, their project never rose to the top. They never got done, but they understood why. And they were part of the decision-making process so that they knew or hoped that someday we'd get to theirs, but they saw the importance of what was being done ahead of them. This bought us total buy-in from every department. We did not have any clashes about priorities with anyone throughout the organization. And this was something that company and Bill in particular, they were kind of genius at. Getting that kind of buy-in, and this was during the 1990s, during the period when Disney really became a global juggernaut in the entertainment world. Everybody had a say. Everybody was part of the decision-making process. And what that got us was, whenever the final decision was made, people felt they had contributed, even if their idea wasn't adopted. And what that led to was, when management said student body left, everybody went student body left. And that was a very, very powerful thing to have on our side. It's one of the reasons that Disney did become the global juggernaut that it did in the 1990s, because they operated in that fashion. Now, of course, Disney is a big company, a very large company. And so this will not apply, you would think, to small businesses. But if you do think that, you're wrong. It applies even more to small businesses because you're in such close quarters. You don't have that many employees. Maybe you have as many as 100. We were dealing with so many more than that. And we were able to keep everybody on board and happy. You can do the same with your business, particularly if you're working at a smaller scale. It'd be so easy to keep people happy and on board with what you're doing. And that is an extremely powerful force. That is what I learned working with Bill at the Walt Disney Company. And I can tell you right now, I knew at the time this was probably the best job I will ever have. And it really was. That's exactly what it turned out to be. And they gave authority to people. I mean, they sent me literally around the world to work on projects for the stores. And I had a global network that I was running to maintain the systems in those stores. That was a hell of a responsibility for me to take on, something I'd never done before. But you know what? If you give people the authority and the confidence to do it, they'll probably rise to the occasion. And that's what happened to me.
As we come to the end of our 11th show, we wanted to go over a few things. This is the end of our first season, and the average podcast only lasts 9 shows. So we're very happy to be bringing you the sophisticated and quality-oriented content. And I, for one, am extremely thankful that Carl and Vaughn have decided to join me in this effort. And it's been a pleasure and a learning experience every single week. I also want to thank our guests. And the 20 minutes you hear is really only a part of the 3 to 4 hours they spend with us in preparing for that event. They've devoted their time and they've shared their expertise with us. I also want to thank our vendors who we work with every week, David Rosenblatt, Greg Williams on the recordings, Rishi Katz, our favorite voice, and of course, our transcriber, Jamie Karras. We thank you, everyone, and we also thank our listeners, for without you, we would not have a show. Next week starts season 2, and we have a great lineup for you in November and December, and we're looking for an exciting time and an exciting start of the new season. We'll see you then.
No podcast like ours would be possible without the help of some talented people behind the scenes. We would like to thank Audavita Studios and their Director of Podcast Production, Sean Hedinger, Recording Engineer David Rosenblad, Staging and Show Production David Wolf, Social Media Jay Spang, Artist Marsha Carrington, and for our transcriber, Jamie Karras. We all hope you have a productive and inspirational week. I'm Rishi Katz, and we will see you next time here at the Oval Table.